Here to break it all down is New York City political reporter with Politico, Jeff Coltin. He is also the co-author of Politico's New York Playbook newsletter. And Picks on Politics anchor Dan Mannarino is also joining us. Good to have two of the best experts on all things New York. Listen, this battle between the mayor and the president has gotten heated. There have been screaming headlines in our New York tabloids saying, basically, Biden to New York City, drop dead, and Biden to Adams, deal with it. Adams has pleaded repeatedly for help. He even traveled to Washington, D.C. to beg for help. Why isn't he getting it?
It's bad politics for Joe Biden. Of course, the Democratic president doesn't own the issue of immigration well because there is so much criticism of the border policy. This is just an issue that's impossible to get through Washington. So he's been, really hands-off here. And the mayor of New York City, and now a little bit the governor of New York City, governor of New York, have just felt like they're not getting enough money, they're not getting enough support. And most of all, the asylum seekers, the migrants that are arriving in New York, are not legally allowed to work. Some of them, of course, are making some money under the table.
Explain why.
Well, there are so many issues here when you break it down, right? First off, there's the federal dollars that the mayor has been pleading for because he's saying this is going to cost upwards of $12 billion here in New York City. Then there's the work authorization, right? So you have all these migrants, 100,000 that have arrived here in New York City. The dam burst, as the mayor said, right? The shelters are at capacity. We're building temporary shelters. And he's saying if we can't get the money, allow them the right
to work. At least to work.
They need these work authorizations.
So they can earn money and pay for their own food and shelter.
Exactly, so they can get out of the shelter system and then pay their own rent. It is up to the federal government to allow those work authorization permits to move forward, and that's now what he's saying. If you don't want to give us the money, well, okay, that's one thing, but give us the work authorizations to put people to work.
Why does Biden still say no to that?
Well, it's not necessarily the president who's saying no. Correct me, he's been pretty quiet on that issue. I spoke to Congressman Dan Goldman about it, saying we are all talking to Secretary Mayorkas about getting these work authorizations moved forward, and we're trying to do it expeditiously. Now, I spoke to Congressman Goldman this morning. He said, look, it could be any day now, but it could also not be every day now. But he's hoping that within the next week or two, they move forward with it.
Look, President Biden has been taking a lot of hits on his border policies. I mean, Secretary Mayorkas has been, the Republicans have been threatening to impeach him since, they took control of Congress. Why on earth would you allow the biggest city in the United States to basically begin to fall apart at the seams rather than step in and help? It is a very visual. We're looking at pictures right now of people sleeping on the streets. The subways are crowded with the candy sellers. It is beyond difficult, and it's also, we're now hearing from doctors, it could become a public health crisis because these people are coming across the border without being screened for diseases and that sort of thing. In other words, I guess I don't get why President Biden is allowing such a visual reminder of the failure, perhaps, of these policies to exist and thrive right here.
I think there's an interesting scenario here where New York has a reputation of taking in immigrants. And Mayor Adams has really been trying to balance that, where he has at sometimes said, yes, we are New York. We love taking in people. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, like the Statue of Liberty. Then at other times, the mayor has said, we're full, please don't come, please don't come. And there's a real, tough balance there to both maintain New York City's reputation and to also basically turn people away. And I think that maybe that reputation is kind of informing Washington's response, informing the White House response, saying, New York's got this. This has been the history of New York.
Yeah, but he's been saying very loudly for a very long time now, New York doesn't have this. Yes. And we also have right to shelter. Tell me about the right to shelter. We are the only place in the entire country, in New York City, that offers people a right to shelter law.
Yeah, only city in America to this day. There were others that used to, and then they got rid of it. But New York City has to provide shelter up to 60 days for anybody who arrives here that does not have the status. So an asylum seeker, whoever comes into New York, they have to be given the right. Now, the problem with that, according to the mayor, is we have no more space. Right? So you have to provide the shelter, which is why you're seeing scenes like you saw play outside the Roosevelt Hotel, which have really made national headlines, of folks like outside this hotel sleeping on the streets. They're built to capacity. They have nowhere to go. They don't want to put kids on the street. So they're moving the single men to tent structures, trying to move families into these shelters. And now you're just kind of moving people around like chess pieces because of that law.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.